Good morning. Welcome to the Middle East and North Africa PPP virtual think tank. My name is Richard Thompson. I am the editorial director of MEED, and I will be your chairperson for today, and hopefully will help you navigate through what is going to be a very busy day. The purpose of today's event is to look at the position of public-private partnerships in the Middle East and North Africa, and to provide you with a comprehensive update of PPP in this region. Using the private sector to design, build, finance and operate public infrastructure is not a new concept. It has been around in this region and around the world in its modern form for decades, and in a more general form for centuries. But despite the fact that it is a well-established concept of using the private sector to deliver public services, the Middle East and North Africa region has struggled to adopt public-private partnerships and PPP in recent years. It's only really in the power and water sector where sovereign offtake guarantees and feedstock supply agreements have removed a lot of the complexity from PPP contracts, where we've seen public-private partnerships become a norm. And there have been many factors behind why PPP has not gained traction in this region outside of the electricity and water sector. These factors include the lack of institutional frameworks, a PPP central unit or a PPP law, packaging of projects to make them attractive to investors or bankable projects for banks to lend money into. The commercial track record, the lack of experience delivering PPP outside the electricity and water sector means there is a lack of a commercial track record on which developers and investors can build their risk models. And then lack of capacity in terms of legal capacity, lawyers and other professionals who can help deliver and package and implement PPP. So all of those are real factors in hindering the progress. But without question, the most important factor, the single biggest factor that has inhibited PPP in the Middle East and North Africa has really been the lack of a political will to drive public-private partnerships. And this is perhaps not surprising. With some of the wealthiest countries on earth, there has really been no political imperative, in fact the opposite, to hand over state assets to private investors and operators. But this has changed, and this is why today's virtual think tank on PPP is so critical. The mood has changed. Over the past 5 years, we have seen volatility in the oil markets, and that consistent weakness in oil prices has fundamentally impacted on the finances of governments in this region. And then we get to 2020 and the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has shifted the priorities for governments as they've focused on the health crisis, and also thrown economies into deep recession in 2020, which has thrown national finances into disarray. So the priority now for governments in this region, once they are on top of the health crisis, which is always the top priority, is tight management of national finances. But despite this, the infrastructure need in this region still remains. There is a desperate need to provide adequate infrastructure to be competitive in the global marketplace, but also to meet the needs of a growing population and an expanding economy. According to MEED Projects, which is the project tracking service from MEED, there are over $3.4 trillion worth of projects currently planned or underway, currently planned. This is just future projects in the Middle East and North Africa regions, 3.4 trillion. And of this, about 1/3, about 1.3 trillion are infrastructure projects. So that is excluding oil and gas, excluding private real estate, just looking at transport and public buildings and electricity and water. So about $1.3 trillion worth of infrastructure spending is required. But delivering this to meet the needs is an absolute must for governments, and finding ways to deliver this $1.3 trillion worth of infrastructure spending requires new thinking in the current financial and fiscal climate. And so PPP is back on the table, and this time with real political will behind it. So across the region, we are seeing governments addressing some of these shortcomings that I mentioned earlier, putting in PPP laws, creating PPP central units, building in-country capacity to deliver and package PPP projects, and a huge pipeline of PPP projects is emerging. My colleague Ed James is going to be presenting in an hour or so on the details of the PPP market in this region. But according to a new report published by MEED Insight today, a report called PPP in the Middle East and North Africa 2021, there are about 240 PPPs currently being planned in the Middle East and North Africa region, worth a combined value of about $200 billion. So there's a huge pipeline of PPP building up, and we're going to see more and more opportunities coming up in the coming months and years. So today, the purpose of this event today is to look at these opportunities, but also to look at the challenges and the trends and how these projects are going to be delivered. And hopefully, we're going to give you a sense of how you can tap these opportunities and find new business opportunities. I think given the slowdown in the projects market in the region and the general slowdown in the economies at the moment, PPP is going to become increasingly important driver of future business opportunities for contractors, for consultants, for lawyers, for everybody involved in the project sector in this part of the world. So it's an important event today, and we have a very busy program of content. The day is broadly split into two halves. In the morning session, we will be looking at the regional view of PPP in the Middle East and North Africa, and we will be hearing from a number of very senior speakers from different markets across the region who will present a regional picture of what is going on in each country and some of the sort of the future plans, and also some of the obstacles and barriers that have to be overcome. And so the morning session runs from 10:30, so from now until 12:30, and you can see the content throughout the morning session. The content will be delivered to you either on stage 1 or stage 2 of this platform. Now, if you look on the left-hand side of your screen, you will see an icon that says stages. That will take you, if you click on that icon, it will take you to either stage 1 or stage 2. So currently we are on stage 1, and we will jump between stage 1 and stage 2 through the morning session. We will break for networking at about 12:30, but at 1 o'clock UAE time, we will move into our afternoon session, which splits into 3 streams. We have a power and water stream, we have a social infrastructure stream, and we have a transport infrastructure stream. And to attend those streams, you use the sessions icon that is on the left-hand side of your screen. So at 1 o'clock, when you want to join one of those streams, you go to the left-hand icon that says sessions, and you will see the 3 sessions: power and water, social infrastructure, transport infrastructure, and you select the one that you wish to attend, and then those sessions will run from 1 o'clock until 3 o'clock this afternoon. And so that's the breakdown of the program. There's one more button on the left-hand side that you will find useful today, and it's the networking button. So on the left-hand side, you can see the icons. The second one from the bottom says networking. That gives you the opportunity to see who else is attending the conference and to link up with them and to sort of network as if we were in a traditional conference. So this platform allows us to see content on stages, the sessions streams on the sessions button, and then networking on the networking button. If you have any problems finding what you want, please use the chat tab that's on the right hand side and send in your comments, your questions, your concerns, or even your opinions. And throughout the day, we will be looking to sort of get you involved through questions and opinions. So that's through the chat tab that's on the right hand side. So content is on the left hand side icons, contributions on the right hand side tabs. Okay, so that's more than enough from me. My job today is to make the session run smoothly. I do encourage you all to get involved. We have an incredible program of speakers. I mean, really an excellent participation from very senior levels who can tell you exactly what you need to know about PPP in the different markets across the Middle East and North Africa. So use this opportunity, send in your questions, get involved. It's a great forum to try and find out more and understand what's going on in PPP. But now I'd like to introduce our opening speaker. I'm absolutely delighted that we've been able to get Ziad Hayek, who is the president of the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals. Ziad is the vice chair of the UN Economic Commission for Europe Working Party on PPP, and he is the managing partner at Hayek Associates. Now, Ziad has a short opening address to deliver, which is on the topic of the time is now, embracing innovative and collaborative approaches to financing and delivering PPPs. But with just a little bit of arm twisting by me, he has agreed also to do a little bit of a Q&A after his opening address. So we're very fortunate that we will we'll be able to grill Ziad on some of the detail as well. But first, it gives me a great privilege to be able to invite Ziad Hayek to deliver the opening address for today's think tank. Over to you, Ziad.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you to Middle East Economic Digest and Hop-In to provide this platform for all of us to connect and interact and exchange ideas. Very important at this stage. Talking about MENA region, I think everybody that's attending this conference knows that we're talking about very varied countries, at different stages of development, different political environments, etc. So you have anything from the UAE with highly developed infrastructure to places like Yemen, perhaps where infrastructure has been destroyed and needs rebuilding. So with these environments, the question is, where does PPP play a role? Well, I think PPP plays a role everywhere. It actually plays a role in helping with the space program in the UAE, and it's going to help eventually with building hotels in Yemen in order to kickstart development and attract investors. Post-conflict situations in PPP are important. They're going to be important in Libya. They're going to be important in Syria and other places as well. And I've talked about this at length at the Arab League and other places. And but it's not the subject of today. I just want to say that do not discount PPP in its various forms, whether it is for small projects or large visionary projects. As Richard said, and as most of you know, the MENA region is a little bit behind on this. Europe, Canada, Australia, Asia Pacific, and Latin America have certainly progressed a lot. And there's now an ample body of knowledge and experience to guide every professional in this area that wants to get involved in PPP. So today, with the 10 minutes that I have, I'm not going to get into all the details of PPP, which will take weeks and months to get into in detail, but I will just highlight a few ideas that are related to perhaps innovation and financing and things that we are not necessarily getting every day in the PPP training programs that we have. I think many countries think of PPP and governments as either an alternative tool for procurement. So, this is a different way of procuring from the normal procurement measures, or they think of it as a way to finance infrastructure because they don't have money. And with the situation today that countries are losing income and are incurring budget deficits, it is very tempting to think of PPPs in that light. I cannot afford this project, so let the private sector come in and finance it. It is absolutely the wrong way to think about PPP, in my opinion. PPP should be looked at as a tool for development. It is not a tool for financing. Obviously, there are some advantages to using PPP in financing so that a government can kickstart a number of projects at the same time. But unless these projects are user-pay PPPs and are not putting any additional financial stress on government finances, if they are of the PFI type, governments are going to be under financial stress. They're just postponing that. So, we're advising every government today to focus on user-pay PPPs, and since money is fungible, keep public financing for other infrastructure. Of course, it doesn't mean that other types of PPPs should not be done. It's just that they should be done with care. The IMF has a program called PFRAM, the PPP framework, or PPP fiscal risk assessment model, and governments should use that. PPP units should familiarize themselves with that. Finance ministries should familiarize themselves with that and see how how to manage public finances regarding PPP. So I want to talk about legislation, programs, and projects. On the legislation side, we know that there's PPP legislation is very important. Some countries can do PPP and have done it successfully without legislation, especially in the water and electricity sectors, perhaps. But in order to gain investor confidence, especially in markets that are less well known to investors, a legal framework is important. Now, this needs to be dynamic, and we've seen Egypt, we've seen Jordan, Morocco, Tunisia. They have adapted their initial legislative frameworks. So they have amended legislation in order to suit the times and suit their environment. And this is exactly the way that all governments should be thinking about this. Think of your legislation as dynamic, as difficult as that might be. Regarding programs, announcing pipelines is very important, and sticking to them is very important. And here again, I think MENA region countries are not doing a great job. There are some exceptions, perhaps Jordan, Egypt, that have announced specific programs. But I think there needs to be more effort put on pipelines, because private companies need to know how to apportion their effort, how to apportion their equity investments. They cannot invest in everything all, at the same time. But the more important thing about thinking about pipeline and programs is, what is technology doing? What is the developing environment doing? COVID-19 has provided us with an opportunity to rethink everything. And I think this is in many ways healthy. So, building more roads at the expense of perhaps public transport infrastructure, with the better ways that now you can provide more efficient public sector infrastructure for transport, might not be the smartest thing to do. The thinking, going back to the theme that I was talking about PPP as a tool for development, looking at the food, energy, water, environment continuum as one process, and thinking about how to build a PPP program that actually fits that continuum, and not think just of energy, for example, or just of water. Talking about the environment, there are many new things that are happening. For example, using land, for example, the Amazon, protecting the Amazon forest with PPP projects that have to do with issuing cryptocurrency, perhaps, or other related items. And these are very interesting, innovative programs that are being put in place. Social infrastructure, again, schools are being affected tremendously by COVID-19. Do we need to invest in more school buildings, or do we need to invest in better telecom infrastructure and better programming? So these are important things to think about. Digital parks, and several countries in Egypt and other places, they're developing digital parks, technology parks, because actually PPP needs to, innovation drives PPP, but PPP also drives innovation, as we've seen with COVID-19 now, and investment in vaccines, etc. Like there are e-government, digital identity programs. These are all, data centers. These are all types of infrastructure that should be part of PPP pipelines, and not just think of the traditional infrastructure. The other thing about pipelines is PPPs with NGOs. I'm a big fan of that. Lebanon has been a fantastic place for this, because we have not had a functioning government probably since 1975. And the country today, all social services are provided by NGOs rather by the government, of course, under contract with the government in many places. So they are PPP programs. And I have been big fan, or a big promoter of the idea of multilateral development banks investing in NGOs, so lending to NGOs, not just lending to governments and private sector. Many NGOs can take loans, can repay them, and we need to think of NGOs, include them in the social infrastructure programs that we have. Schools is one of the great environments for that. Going down to the level of projects, minimizing the use of sovereign guarantees is very important. I always say, if your advisor says, I want a blanket sovereign guarantee, change advisors. There needs to be better thinking, more creativeness about segmenting the risks in a PPP project, and mitigating each risk separately. And then if there's a residual that requires a sovereign guarantee, then use that. And some of the things that can be done is like insurance. For example, we are not using insurance sufficiently in MENA. We need to do that more. I encourage everybody to watch a video that was put out by the Long-Term Infrastructure Investors Association that talks about the use of insurance in PPP. Thinking, not rushing into projects, taking the time. And I know this requires a lot of education for political decision makers, but preparing your project for ESG, for it to be ESG, acceptable. I'm sorry, I'm not finding the right word under time pressure. This will help open a lot of, there's $30 trillion worth of investment funds that are out there for ESG projects, and there's rating agencies that are doing that. You can, if you take your time to prepare your project well, you can access this. Mezzanine financing, which is not being used a lot in the Middle East. There are funds that are being formed for that. We need, projects need to be prepared more for this, and the government must take leadership. It's not like we'll let the private sector every time decide. If there is no government leadership, there is no PPP in essence that's happening. I want to say two last very quick things. One is, I want to talk about the importance of PPP units and political decision makers empowering PPP units to do their job. We have excellent professionals in PPP. You have Mahmoud Al-Khushman in Jordan, Atir Hanoura in Egypt, Atif Majdoub in Tunisia, and many others. And governments should let these people who are extremely capable take the leadership role in setting, the strategy and the policies for PPP. And the last thing I want to say is WHAP, the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals, is a great hub where people from the public sector, the private sector, consultants can interact in order to improve PPP delivery and gain more experience. And talking about innovation, we are starting a youth chapter in WHAP, and I think this is very important. These are PPP professionals that are younger than 35 years old. They have a lot of ideas for driving innovative ways of thinking about PPP, and I encourage everybody to join and to participate. Thank you very much.
Well, Ziad, Hayek, thank you so much for those comments. I mean, each thing you said could have probably started a whole debate for a full conference. So I recognise that you were cramming a lot of detail into some very headline statements there. So thank you very much. I've got time for just one very quick question I want to ask you. Now, when I set up my opening remarks, I think I fell into the trap that you were critical of at the beginning. So I framed the whole discussion in terms of finance. Now, you described a whole range of opportunities for PPP and public-private partnerships, whether it was in the space program in the UAE through to digital parks or NGOs, a huge diversity of things. If it's not about finance, why hasn't it been done before? So in this region, you have vision-led governments in the GCC region, and in other parts of this region, you've got very visionary individuals and professionals. If it's not about finance, why haven't we done it before?
I think really lack of awareness, especially at the political decision-making level, fear sometimes that it might be seen as privatization and attract opposition from the left side of the political spectrum. But I would say mainly, really, it is the lack of awareness among politicians of what is PPP. They often mistake PPP for co-investment in companies. They and even when they understand it, when they understand that it's a partnership in risks, they still want the airport project built in 6 months. I want you to deliver that airport project in 6 months. It's not doable. They need to understand that how PPP functions, and we would like to play a more active role in educating political decision makers. And we are at WHAP, we are forming the WHAP Council of PPP Unit Heads, and this is one of the things we hope to discuss with PPP Unit Heads, how we can educate their politicians more on that subject. Okay, well, MEED is here to help with that message, and everyone, we've got a lot of people that have joined today's conference. Everyone, clearly is interested and wants to be part of it. So we have a community that can help, get that message out there. But for this session, I'm afraid we've run out of time. So Ziad Hayek, President of the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals, Vice Chair of the UN Economic Commission for Europe Party on PPP, and Managing Partner of Hayek Associates, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much.